Currently sitting on the edge of our seats, waiting for the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. There is prosecutorial misconduct across the board, evidence that the prosecutors manipulated evidence in this case to disadvantage the defense, serious constitutional violations, and we don't know how that judge will rule. But we do have some other stories to go through, and this one I am obsessed with, and you all know it. Because I was right. And people told me I was crazy. People who are fans of the show said, Tim, you are reaching here. It was an accident. And I'm talking about Alec Baldwin. That's why you clicked the video. Alec Baldwin intentionally fired the shot that killed Halyna Hutchins and chose to play Russian roulette with a loaded gun in violation of the script, new lawsuit claims. You see, most of you probably know the story. Alec Baldwin on the set of the film Rust fired a gun, killed a woman, injured another guy. I stated a couple weeks ago, I believe Alec Baldwin may have done this intentionally. Everybody immediately said, oh, you're losing it. I had people on Twitter, not leftists or anything, not critics. These are not critics who are criticizing. This is why I'm so obsessed with this. They were like, oh, man, Tim, you're trying too hard to get views. I was right. I'm not saying I was right, that I have proof that Alec Baldwin did decide to murder a woman. The point I made was, why are we operating under the assumption it was an accident? Well, we had a conversation maybe a week and a half ago, and our guest on IRL said, crisis management firm. You see? The idea is that as soon as Alec Baldwin killed this woman, he gets on his phone with his PR guy or company, and they say, we're going to seed this. The first story we hear is Alec Baldwin, blank, misfires, shrapnel hits woman, she dies. The real story was Alec Baldwin was not supposed to be handed a gun, was not supposed to pull the hammer back, was not supposed to point the weapon, was not supposed to fire the gun at all. And if that is all true, why did he point it at this woman? See, I'm pissed off because I thought I was being reasonable and rational when I came out and said, why are we all operating under the assumption that this was an accident? And I get everybody constantly telling me. I mean, we had guests on the show, more than one. Yeah, are you serious? You think he meant to do this? I'm like, why do you think he didn't? I'm not saying I know he did. I'm saying stop. Remove all assumption. What happened? Alec Baldwin draws gun, is handed gun, draws it, points it at woman, cocks the hammer, pulls the trigger, live round comes out, woman dies. In what reality do you say, sounds like an accident to me? And so when I said, why do we operate under that assumption? People told me crazy. We got this story first. All right. So we have this story from about a week ago. Rust chief electrician reportedly sues Alec Baldwin, armor, and assistant for negligence. In this case, what happens is the electrician says Alec Baldwin wasn't supposed to fire the gun. We cover it. And I said, see, there you go. You weren't supposed to fire a gun. Sounds like I was right. Not that he did intentionally. We have proof, but that operating under the assumption it was an accident is incorrect. What did everybody say? How does an electrician know? How does the electrician know what the scene called for? And I said, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he does. Regardless, why are you assuming it was an accident? Here's the latest story. And we'll go through this. We'll break this stuff down. The script supervisor for the film Rust said that Alec Baldwin intentionally fired the shot that killed Halyna Hutchins. It wasn't an accident. He did it on purpose. Now, is she saying that he intentionally killed her? I don't think so. Here's the story from Law and Crime. A new lawsuit was filed Wednesday over the fatal shooting incident on the set of Alec Baldwin's Western Rust that names the star and producer as defendant. In the lawsuit filed by script supervisor Mamie Mitchell, Baldwin is accused of failing to follow the script's direction by firing a gun when it wasn't actually called for. Not just that, she said he was not supposed to be handed the weapon. Now that's where it gets weird. The shocking on-set shooting took the life of Halyna Hutchins, this we know. They say, in contrast to an earlier lawsuit filed by the movie's gaffer, Serge Svetnoy, Mitchell's lawsuit alleges that Baldwin and others committed intentional and deliberate acts. Here's the filing. Quote, the events that led to the shooting by Mr. Baldwin of a loaded gun constituted intentional acts or omissions without any just cause or excuse on Alec Baldwin's part or the producers of Rust. Mr. Baldwin chose to play Russian roulette with a loaded gun without checking it and without having the armorer do so. Whoa. I was right. I said, why are we assuming the armorer made the mistake? The armorer is the one person trained with weapons. Why are we assuming the assistant director made the mistake? The assistant director is handed a gun by the armorer. Why are we assuming the man who drew a gun, pulled the hammer, fired it, killing a woman, was all just there by happenstance? And this is important. This line right here. Playing with a loaded gun without having the armorer, without checking it, and without having the armorer do so. You mean to tell me the armorer did not check the weapon? Sounds like it wasn't the armorer's fault. Like I said, when it comes to the accident narrative, you have to make a ton of assumptions and believe this ridiculously circuitous story that the armorer, who's trained in weapons, was negligent and accidentally loaded live rounds and didn't realize and didn't check. Blanks are different from live rounds with bullets. Blanks are the casings, no bullet. Now there are squib rounds that have no powder because they look real in the gun. So it's possible a mistake happened, but we would have to assume the armorer made a mistake, gave it to the assistant director who did not check, yelled cold gun, gives it to Alec Baldwin with decades of experience who does not check, and then for no reason aims it, pulls the hammer, shoots a woman. How about this one? The crew had been complaining, threatening to walk off set. Alec Baldwin has anger management issues. In the heat of the moment, angry, he's handed a gun, loads it, shoots her. Oopsie. I mean, I got to be honest. It doesn't sound like a passion crime. If that is the more plausible outcome, that Alec Baldwin was angry and decided to kill this woman, it was premeditated because he had to get the bullet in that gun. Now, don't get me wrong. I still certainly think it's entirely possible this was a freak accident, that the armorer didn't realize the squib rounds and the live rounds were next to each other. Maybe it was sabotage. My point is only this. I don't know for sure. I personally will not operate from the stance that it was an accident because that requires too much guesswork. The only thing that matters is that Alec Baldwin pointed the gun and shot it. Now, with this lawsuit, armorer didn't check it. AD didn't check it. Baldwin didn't check it. How could you have such an egregious violation of standard protocol among three people who are trained? And then Alec Baldwin decides to shoot a gun the scene doesn't call for? Get the out of here. No way. The only thing I can see is like he killed that woman and he wanted to. Maybe it's not true. I don't know. He's innocent until proven guilty. Like I said, you know, in my previous segment, I talked about Rittenhouse and indictments and my refusal to participate in the system. It is better that 100 guilty persons go free than one innocent person suffer. Call me a hypocrite, by all means, because I'm not sure how I justify, how I reconcile this. But if I was on a grand jury and they came to me with all this evidence, I would be like, I'm not going to indict. I will not be a judge over someone, even as a responsible member of this society. I just won't do it. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be there. I don't want the 0.1% chance that I personally condemned someone. But I will say if they filed criminal charges against him, if he was indicted, I'd be for it. Or at the very least, an investigation into what exactly happened. Because I believe in justice. I just don't like I just would never want to be the person who has power over someone else in that capacity. Maybe I should be. So, comment. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. Let's read more. They say his behavior and that of one of the producers on Rust were intentional acts and or omissions, without any just cause or excuse, and with utter disregard of the consequences of said acts or omissions. The fact that live ammunition was allowed on the movie set, that guns and ammunition were left unattended, that the gun in question was handed to Mr. Baldwin by the AD who had no business doing so. Whoa. The fact that safety bulletins were not promulgated or ignored, coupled with the fact that the scene in question did not call for a gun to be fired at all, makes a case where injury or death was much more than just a possibility. It was a likely result. Whoa. The AD wasn't supposed to give him a gun? He wasn't supposed to shoot it? I'm a reasonable person. Maybe what the lawsuit is saying is that the armorer was supposed to be the one to give him the weapon. I understand those possibilities, but I don't like to make assumptions beyond what is said. All I know is he wasn't supposed to be handed the gun by the assistant director. He certainly wasn't supposed to then raise that gun, point it at the camera, the woman behind it, cock the hammer, and pull the trigger. The rules of gun safety. Never point first is always treat a gun as if it's loaded. Baldwin didn't do that. Never point a weapon at something unless you intend to destroy it. Alec Baldwin perhaps intended to destroy this camera and hurt this person, maybe, I don't know. But he pointed that gun. You keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Not only did his finger go on the trigger, he cocked the hammer. It was a single action revolver. That means, okay, so modern revolvers are double action. When you pull the trigger, the hammer goes back and then wham, hits the primer. The hammer hits the primer, boom, or the firing pin. Which one is it? Dude, hits the primer. Bullet go explosion. Bullet goes off. Single action revolvers. I actually own one. You have to pull the hammer back manually, then pull the trigger. It's old school. So not only did Alec Baldwin have his finger on the trigger, he cocked the hammer. Rule number 4: always know what you are pointing at and what lies beyond it. Alec Baldwin may have been pointing at the camera, but this woman lied beyond it. He violated every rule, and Alec Baldwin has decades of training. The moment I heard Alec Baldwin had decades of firearms training, my mind went straight to intentional murder. The crew had been complaining, and he says, I had a dinner. She was my friend. We had dinner on Friday. Was it a dinner? Or was it a private meeting to discuss terms on the problems happening on set? I don't know for sure. And I don't want to speculate beyond what I don't know. I just know they had a meeting. He says Halyna's not there to tell us what really went down. I believe another person was there who could tell us, Joel. But Alec Baldwin chose to make an intentional act. That's interesting, isn't it? They go on to say the 30-page original complaint also offers what Mitchell says should have happened during the tragic scene in question. When the morning filming was completed, everyone broke for lunch. At that time, plaintiff Hutchins and Souza met and spoke together in order to confirm what filming would take place after the break. It was discussed that there would be 3 tight camera shots when filming resumed. One camera shot would be focused on the defendant Baldwin's eyes. One would be focused on a blood stain on defendant Baldwin's shoulder. And the third would focus on defendant Baldwin's torso as he reached his hand down to holster and remove the gun. There was nothing in the script about the gun being discharged by defendant Baldwin or by any other person. Okay. So it seems like he should have had the weapon, but it shouldn't have come from the AD. It should have come from the armorer who checked it. So here's what I think if I were to make an assessment. Alec Baldwin was goofing off. He was drawing the weapon and then thought he'd be funny and went, ha-ha! Bang. Dead. Now, that's negligent homicide, I suppose. And we talked with Mike Cernovich last night. He was on the show. He was hanging out. He's a lawyer. And I asked him, if a guy is standing in the middle of the street and Alec Baldwin walks up to him, pulls a gun, cocks the hammer, points it, shoots it, kills him, what would a prosecutor go for? And he's like, oh, that's intentional homicide. And I was like, right, so why is this different? And he made a good point about how the courts work. Because they'll look at the patterns in the circumstance. Because it is a movie set. Because Alec Baldwin didn't have a gun because he wanted to act, because if you're out in the street with a gun, it's for self-defense, presumably, or your right to bear arms. But the gun is intentionally there as a weapon. On set, the gun is there as a prop. However, I don't think it's fair to call it a prop gun. It was a real gun. But the DA would look at this and say the intention of the weapon was just to be shown on camera, not to be used as a weapon in self-defense or otherwise. On the street, that's not the case. Unless you're filming somebody, like you're out walking around with a weapon, it's clearly to be used as a weapon to cause harm, and typically in the event of legal self-defense. Some people might want to do, nasty things, and commit violent acts. So I think, as I stated the first time around, Alec Baldwin was screwing around. He was screwing around and laughing. And there was a viral post where apparently they said Alec Baldwin said, how about I just shoot the both of you, and then pull the gun and pull the trigger. Apparently that was a hoax. That was someone took an article and then edited it to put in this text and then made it go viral. But now I find that completely plausible. I mean, I always did. They're going to say there was supposed to be no discharge by Baldwin or any other person. The lawsuit also says that safety protocols were violated in the immediate moments leading up to the shooting, and that such violations were also deliberate decisions by Baldwin and the assistant director Dave Halls. Quote, live ammunition was allowed onto the set despite the fact that live ammunition is never to be used nor brought onto any studio lot or stage. The complaint goes on. Alec Baldwin intentionally, without just cause or excuse, cocked and fired the loaded gun, even though the upcoming scene to be filmed did not call for cocking and firing the firearm. Alec Baldwin intentionally, without just cause or excuse, fired the gun towards individuals, including plaintiff Miss Hutchins and Mr. Souza, even though the protocol was not to do so. It wasn't just the scene. It was protocol. You guys, I bet most of you know gun stuff more than I do. You know exactly what this is about. The lawsuit says that Baldwin flouted well-known safety rules when firing the gun, rules he would have been well apprised of after his decades in Hollywood. Quote, Alec Baldwin should have assumed the gun in question was loaded unless and until it was demonstrated to him or checked by him that it was not loaded. He had no right to rely upon some alleged statement by the AD that it was a cold gun. Mr. Baldwin cannot hide behind the AD to attempt to excuse the fact that he did not check the gun himself. Additionally, the lawsuit says that Baldwin and other producers made intentional efforts to save costs and that those decisions intentionally endangered lives. Quote, plaintiff is informed and believes, and therein alleges, that defendant producers intended to cut through what was considered derisively as red tape, common in Hollywood-based productions, by running some of Rust filmmaking out of Georgia and New Mexico. As part of the cost-cutting measures taken to produce Rust within the low-budget mold, defendant producers intentionally failed to hire experienced crew members to manage and handle the numerous weapons that were to be used in the film Rust, an outlaw Western-themed film that was shown to involve the use of numerous firearms, considered an ultra-hazardous activity throughout the filming. The filing technically alleges 3 causes of action: 1, assault; 2, intentional infliction of emotional distress; and 3, deliberate infliction of harm. He's being sued for deliberate infliction of harm. Intentional? Wow. As a result of defendant Baldwin's pointing and discharging the gun towards her, Mitchell has suffered compensable damages, including without limitation, extreme and severe emotional distress, for which he has had to employ medical treaters, including without limitation mental health providers for her emotional and physical injuries. Plaintiff was severely injured in, without limitation, her health, strength, and activity, and sustained serious physical trauma and shock and injury to her nervous system and person, all of which injuries have caused and continue to cause plaintiff extreme mental, physical, and nervous pain. I don't know exactly what happened to this individual, but you need to understand that when Alec Baldwin pulled the gun, pulled the hammer back, pulled the trigger, ejecting a live round, killing a woman and injuring another, that bang probably led a ton of people to jump and slam to the ground. And they probably got hurt too. I'm not going to pretend they got shot hurt. But an older woman working on a set, or middle-aged woman, yeah, she may have bruised up. She may be sore. She may have some sprains. You know, I was talking about this in the 88 in the Rittenhouse case with 88 Binger. If I was in the jury, you guys know this 88 Binger pointed the AR-15 with his finger on the trigger at the jury. So it was reported. I still don't believe it, to be honest, but it was reported by Western Journal and several other individuals, verified individuals on Twitter, several other news outlets. If I was in the jury in the Rittenhouse trial and the prosecutor pointed a gun at me, I would hit the deck. I would immediately drop down. I have been in gun shops where someone will look at a weapon and they'll turn and I will jump back. I don't care if you think that gun is not loaded. I, whether I'm handling it or not, will always treat a gun as if it is loaded. So that means if you're a prosecutor and there's no magazine in the AR, there could be one in the chamber. I don't care. A gun is always loaded. I suppose it's funny to say because, like, if you're in combat and you're going click, click, you're like, oh no. But if I was on that jury, I would have thrown other people to the deck. I would have grabbed them and get down. I'm not kidding. I would freak out. I would have freaked out. I would have I'll tell you this, at the very least, if we got past that, I'd go into the jury deliberations and I would be like, acquittal on all counts. The prosecutor pointed a gun at me. He has no grounds. His entire argument's moot. He has no idea what he's talking about. Acquittal on all counts. They go on to say, safety issues should have been on the producers' minds, Mitchell says, because of at least 2 instances of weapons misfiring during the filming of Rust. You're not getting past me on this. It was an accident. Multiple misfires? Pointing a weapon for no reason? I'll tell you this. If there's one thing I can't say as to why it should be considered intentional is because with the misfires, Alec Baldwin knew there was a possibility the gun could go off. It happened twice before. Well, misfire, I think, is the wrong phrase. I think it was negligent discharge. Alec Baldwin's like, haha, I'm going to point it at you. Bang. Dead. He knows too much. He knows too much. This wasn't an instant where the gun fell, fired, and hit somebody. This is a guy with decades of firearms safety protocol, safety training. Pointed a gun at someone and pulled the trigger. I mean, more than that. Cocked the hammer back. It was single action. I mean, this is an intentional act. Okay. All right, I got to stop for a second. Because I've been saying, he was going, ha-ha, right? Ha, like he was goofing off. Because I've seen people do it a lot. He cocked the hammer back. That's the one thing. The one thing that gets me to, yo, maybe he wanted to kill this woman. It's one thing if he had the gun and he went, yeah, he pointed at him. It's another thing if he picks the gun up, cocks the hammer, points it, and shoots. I think he should be charged. And again, maybe hypocritical for me to say because I'd probably never return an indictment if I was on a grand jury. But I think based on the evidence, man, I mean, it looks intentional, doesn't it? I'm obsessed with this. I know. I'm sorry. It's just that I felt like when I came out and said, guys, I don't think it's an accident, people just didn't believe me. And have you ever had that feeling where you're like, you believe so strongly in something and people don't believe you, but you're like, no, why don't people believe me? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying I know it was intentional. I'm just saying, don't assume it was an accident. People didn't believe me. Here's your lawsuit. It doesn't mean it's proof. It's just a lawsuit. I don't think anything will happen to Alec Baldwin. Meanwhile, we're still awaiting what's going on in the Rittenhouse trial. I got the live updates from Andrew Bronco over at Legal Insurrection. As of 10:12 a.m. Central, occasional glimpses of the judge, but not a whole lot. So we'll see. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast, and I'll see you all there.